Hello, and welcome to learning about brain structure and function with Trish. Learning about the brain can be really confusing, so let's start off by breaking it up into 4 lobes. The 4 lobes of the brain are the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes. Starting off with the frontal lobe, we have it highlighted here. The frontal lobe contains the primary motor cortex, which we'll get more into in just a second here. It also contains the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive function and cognition, as well as containing your personality and social skills. The frontal lobe also contains Broca's area, which is super important for expressive language skills. More on the precentral gyrus, it's here highlighted in yellow. The precentral gyrus's function is planning and executing movement. And now onto the parietal lobe, which is highlighted here. The parietal lobe contains the primary somatosensory cortex, which again we'll talk more about in just a second. It's also responsible for integrating and processing sensory information, such as listening, touch, seeing, and more. The postcentral gyrus, also known as the primary somatosensory cortex, is highlighted in blue. Its functions include processing sensory input, such as touch, pain, temperature, and whether or not something is toxic. And now on to the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe contains the primary auditory cortex, which is responsible for processing auditory information as well as auditory language comprehension. The temporal lobe is important for a lot of other things, including processing emotions, storing and retrieving memories, and receptive language, which is stored in Wernicke's area. The occipital lobe, highlighted here, contains the primary visual cortex. It's crucial for visual processing as well as spatial reasoning. Now that we have broken down the 4 lobes, it's a little bit more manageable to understand which each lobe is responsible for. Now, you've probably heard of being left or right-brained, but it's actually a lot more complex than that. The concept stems from the functions of the left and right hemisphere of the brain. The left hemisphere of the brain is associated more with speech and language, as well as just logic and being more verbal and analytical. Meanwhile, the right hemisphere is more so associated with things like creativity and being intuitive. The reality is that nobody is truly left or right-brained. The brain is so deeply interconnected that in truth, both left and right sides of the brain are being engaged in your day-to-day activities. And now, moving on to some more structures. The basal ganglia, highlighted here, is responsible for motor control and limbic function. Moving on to the cerebellum, it has several functions, including movement, posture and balance, vision, learning, and much more. This next graphic covers the brainstem, spinal cord, and spinal nerves. First up, we have the brainstem. The brainstem regulates vital functions such as breathing, sleeping, blood pressure, and heart rate. I kind of view the spinal cord like a telephone cord. Its primary function is to transmit signals between the brain and the remainder of the body. The spinal nerves work in tandem with the spinal cord. They help carry messages throughout the body as well. The way I think of it, the spinal cord as well as the nerves help to make sure all of the good work and information done in the brain doesn't just get stuck there. It takes good advantage of it and makes sure it gets moved throughout. Up next, we have gray matter and white matter. Pictured here, you can see white matter kind of being more in the center, protected by the gray matter. White matter receives information, sends it, as well as processes it. And gray matter, shown on the outsides, is responsible for learning, emotions, and motor movement. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this helps.